All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba, European roots with that Caribbean soul. Pick up a refreshing German lager in a can. How else are you going to enjoy the start? Week 4 NFL. You got Thursday Night Football tonight. Go to johnnycuba.us. Use the Johnny locator. Find the nearest location to you. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us now, making her debut on ZASLOW Show 2.0. You see her on Around the Horn, ESPN Radio Sunday mornings with Peter Burns. Best week ever. She's got the Bears beat. She's all over the place. Courtney Cronin here with us. Courtney, how you doing? Thank you so much for hanging out with us. You doing all right?
I am doing well. I know our good friend Amber Wilson may or may not be in labor right now.
That's
so hopefully
right.
The storm is clearing through that whole area. But good vibes being sent her way, and got football on tap. Can't believe it's week 4. It's an exciting time.
I'm glad you started there with Amber, expected to have the baby today. She's dealing with all of us down here. I'm in South Florida. We're dealing with a hurricane, not so much us. She's on the west coast of Florida. I'm the east coast. So it's a thing for her. She has to evacuate her home. She's due to have the baby today. It's really awful timing. But the reason I bring this up is because I'm not really inconvenienced, but every week I'm traveling for, I'm hosting college football tailgate. And so this weekend I'm in Tuscaloosa for Alabama and Georgia. And I'm trying to avoid the storm. So we are all flying up a day earlier. So I'm flying up today to Tuscaloosa to try and beat the storm. Like I said, not an inconvenience. All right. But it's a change in travel plans. You travel all the time. Do you have what's the worst ESPN travel situation you've had to manage?
I mean, going in and out of LaGuardia during the summer was an act of futility. Everybody had issues with summer travel, but it just seemed that the path from O'Hare to LaGuardia was never clear. And I was constantly delayed. And there were many a time where we had to sit on the runway, like on an active runway on the tarmac for a couple hours. There was one time I remember leaving practice to go do first take and hauled it to the airport. Was so proud of myself. I got there and we were delayed probably 2.5, 3 hours, just kind of sitting on the tarmac. So I thought that was the worst of it. I do the show on Friday, and while I'm in the middle of the show, I get a text alert from United telling me that my flight from LaGuardia to Buffalo to go cover the Bears preseason game against the Bills. It was the first time we had seen Caleb Williams in action. I got an alert that because of some remnants of Hurricane Debbie, I believe is what it was, some remnants going up the East Coast. I didn't think hurricane stuff went that far. But because of that, my flight was canceled. And I could not get any other flights to Buffalo, so I had to rent a pickup truck, which was the only thing they had available at Enterprise that day, and drive 7 hours through New York, I think a little bit of New Jersey, mostly Pennsylvania, and then back into New York to get to Buffalo. So that was maybe the weekend from hell, given the way it started on a
And that was just
Thursday.
preseason, right?
Yes, that was. But fortunately, everything's kind of smoothed out. The first couple of weeks haven't had any of those same issues.
Like I said, I don't feel inconvenienced, all right? But it's such a small travel situation that I have to deal with today. You had a real travel situation. That's a good one. Let me ask you about the Bears. Of course, Courtney has the Bears beat. Based on what we saw Monday, I'm very high on Caleb Williams. Based on what we saw Monday night with Jaden Daniels, what's the conversation in the Chicago area? Are dopey Bears fans saying, wow, we picked the wrong guy?
The rational ones aren't. Of course, you're going to run into people who look at the situation in Washington and say, wow, did we get the wrong guy? Is Jaden Daniels in a far better situation? Is he a far better quarterback? I try to tell people it's week 3 and everybody needs to calm down and not make any sort of declarations about who's going to be a superstar versus who's going to be a bust. I know that people love to do that, but honestly, it's way too soon, and it's irrational if you're going down that path. Same thing that with the people who are chomping at the bit saying that the Bears should never have traded Justin Fields away. You can't determine that after 3 weeks. And also go look at Justin Fields in Pittsburgh. It's not like they're doing anything spectacular offensively. He's the same quarterback he was here that he is there. So I think everybody here within Hallis Halls, where I am currently, everybody's measured about where Caleb Williams is, knowing that there's growing pains here. Now, you can look at the offense and say that maybe Jaden Daniels has a better offensive coordinator to put him in position for more immediate success. And what he did on Monday Night Football was just absolutely tremendous. The fact that they scored on 14 straight drives, excluding kneel downs, that's really, really good. And they did it against the Bengals, who I know are 0-3, but at one point that was a good defense. It's just been a tough start for Caleb Williams because of a lot of things that are out of his control, the offensive line, some of the play calling decisions. And frankly, I think because of the expectations that were around him, some that he put on himself from the very onset of his NFL career, people expected it to look so much different than it has for a team now that stands at 1-2.
Have you been able to get to know him at all yet?
Yeah, he's very different for what I expected a quarterback coming into this situation. Not just that, you're drafted number 1 overall, but the expectations to take a franchise that has just been rooted in quarterback futility into the future and be the guy to right the ship. He's not a robot. A lot of times you get these rookie quarterbacks who have so much on their plate that all of a sudden the personality is wiped away and they just look like the life's been taken out of them when they're at the podium. He's still who he is. I think that there are some answers that you'll get from a press conference setting that sound like more quarterbacks across the league, that they don't want to tell you too much and they don't want to reveal too much. But, Caleb's different in that sense. I think just a quarterback growing up in the NIL era where he's already been establishing his own brand for a couple of years, and he comes to a place where it's the number 3 market in the country, and he has an opportunity here to do something that nobody else has done for the last 70 years, which is be a franchise quarterback that they drafted and developed. I think he gets that, but I also don't think that it's hardened him to a point where he feels like he can't show who he is and his personality.
Courtney, let me get in a few questions here around the league with you. Let's start with the Dolphins, being that I'm here in Miami. What do you make of the situation going on here? For me, it's unfathomable that you have a quarterback in Tua, who I love, but everybody knows there's an injury concern there. And to go into the season really with no backup plan. So if Tua were to get hurt, which is always a possibility, it's essentially a death sentence for your football team. I'm stunned that they went into this season without any real plan B if Tua has to miss even a little bit of time.
And I know they like Skylar Thompson. I know that he played that playoff game a couple of years ago when Tua got, the 3rd diagnosed concussion in that 2022 season. I still, when you had somebody who has a history of that, to not have a more viable backup option, to me feels like negligence. But again, they were spending elsewhere on the roster, and they probably didn't feel that the options that were out there. You think they're going to bring back Ryan Tannehill after everything he went through with that organization? I just feel like that's short-sighted. Who else? Who else? I mean, the situation's not great right now. They're in a piecemeal situation to figure out if they can get him back after 4 weeks on IR. But it's so fragile that you'd think that they would have had something a little bit more concrete in place behind Tua. But we've seen with backup quarterbacks around the league, very few teams have good situations. Malik Willis is in a great situation right now because of who they've played and because of who his play caller is. I think that if he was, let's say that they would have brought him into Miami, would he have thrived the same way under Mike McDaniel? Maybe, because Mike McDaniel's really good at paring down an offense to tailor to someone's strengths, but that's such a crapshoot to expect that there is just this depth of or breadth of backup quarterback talent across the NFL that's just waiting to be picked up and waiting for an opportunity to shine. More often than not, when you get a backup quarterback in there, it's going to look a lot different than what you see with your starter. And you just can't really hedge your bets that it's ever going to be great. But I'd like to think that, they're probably kicking themselves right now, wondering what they could have done differently to better support the infrastructure in that room behind him.
How about tonight, Courtney? Week 4 gets going. Thursday Night Football, Giants, Cowboys.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see a scenario where the Cowboys drop to 1-3?
I don't personally, and I know that it's a short week. The Giants are at home. The Cowboys have to travel coming off the Baltimore loss. And yeah, the fact that they ran really well in New York last week against Cleveland, it bodes well for them. The Cowboys can't stop anybody right now. And they learned that the hard way with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. But I think this is a get-right game for Dallas. Daniel Jones is not going to outduel Dak Prescott. I truly do not believe that, even with some of the defensive struggles that Dallas has had with Mike Zimmer taking over defensive play calling this season from Dan Quinn. There's a major talent discrepancy here that I don't think is going to get righted out, or I guess evened out by the fact that the Giants are at home for this game. But it's a weird situation that Dallas finds itself in. We thought they were like world beaters in week 1. And then it's not that they just came back down to earth in week 2. Again, that Saints game, they got annihilated. And yeah, the Saints have leveled off a little bit, but I'm very concerned from what this defense has shown us the first 3 weeks of the season, outside of, week 2 and week 3, outside of what we've seen in week 1, which was a great performance. But once they had to defend the run, they struggled with it. And Mike Zimmer defenses typically don't. So I don't know if it's a personnel issue, if it ends up being, a difference in philosophies that just are not melding. But I don't think that the Cowboys will end up losing this game on Thursday Night Football.
Now, Courtney, a sports talk show host, and we hear you all over on ESPN radio, specifically Sunday mornings, best week ever with Peter Burns. We hate being wrong. What has Courtney Cronin been wrong about at the start of this NFL season?
What have I been wrong about? I'll go back to the Saints. I did not expect them to come back down to earth like that. It was just such a stark, whoa, they're up here and then they're down here. I mean, they scored 91 points in their first 2 games. And I do feel like Clint Kubiak has a good scheme going. I think that they've got the right plan in place for Derek Carr, right plan in place for an offensive line that's been super injured, but that's it. The injuries have cost them. They are so banged up right now that maybe it was a great 2 weeks that will never look like that again. But I'd say, I picked the Eagles to win in that game. I picked the Eagles to lose in that game. I didn't expect them to win by 3, but I still don't think they're a very good team. I still think that Nick Sirianni's got some hubris issues that he has to deal with head on here, because his seat's getting warmer and warmer with each week that passes and every loss or win that goes by. But I'd say probably beyond that, nobody picked the Vikings to be 3-0. Come on. Nobody can stake claim to, they're going to be the only team in the division that's undefeated going into the quarter mark of the season. But it is really impressive to see what Kevin O'Connell has been able to do for Sam Darnold. If this continues, then we're going to be talking about this as one of the greatest resurgences at the quarterback position of this era.
What would you do? At the end, if we get to the end of the year and Darnold ends up being
McCarthy.
You have to. You can't just throw Darnold in the garbage if he's going to be the guy who the Jets thought he was a few years ago, right?
He's playing his way into a $30 million a year contract. So good for him. But, they drafted J.J. McCarthy to turn the page from Kirk Cousins. It is going to be so difficult, I think, to move off of that plan when he gets healthy. So let's just see what happens with Sam Darnold. It's a situation that you don't have to find the answer to today, but it's one that bears watching. And on the other side of the ball too, I knew Brian Flores' defense was going to be really, really good. I didn't think they'd give San Francisco problems like that. That to me was just astonishing, how they had Brock Purdy under pressure that much. And even he said, he went up to Flores after the game. He was like, your scheme's crazy. So good for them for being 3-0 right now. Good for the ability to adapt and adjust. And it's cool watching these 2 quarterbacks that were taken in the same draft class, both Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, have a chance to continue on their careers in a way where they had to make a couple stops along the way and things weren't great, but it shows you that things can get better if you're with the right team, have the right players around you, and have the right scheme. So for a guy like Bryce Young, everybody wants to write him off right now when he gets traded, because inevitably that's going to happen from Carolina somewhere else. Hopefully he lands in a situation like those 2 other quarterbacks did to, be able to jumpstart or, reignite his career.
One more here, Courtney Cronin. What can you brag about that you've been most right about to start this season?
I didn't think the Packers were going to be in that much of trouble. Like I say, so we're talking about Tua, right? Like, and everybody freaking out about what happens after he goes down in that Buffalo game, and they need to get a backup quarterback in there. Like, who, can they not waste this season? All of that. So everyone was freaking out when the quarterback injury happens to Jordan Love in Brazil. It's like, oh God, go sign Ryan Tannehill. He's right there. And everybody was chomping at the bit for that. And I just remember saying, like, do we not know who this guy's offensive coordinator / head coach is? The guy who's scheming this offense to simplify it, to rely on what Malik Willis does best, which is running the football as a quarterback. It was half field reads. It was leaning on the run game. They put up insane numbers on Indianapolis. They did the same, similar to the Tennessee Titans. I just kept thinking to myself, like, why is everybody jumping the gun here when we know who Matt LaFleur is and what he's gotten out of quarterbacks, what he's gotten out of these offenses? I was no concern there. So I feel like that's something I remember we were talking about on Around the Horn. Everybody's just hitting the panic button. I'm like, relax. This is going to be fine. Yes, they play Minnesota this weekend. No one has looked good from the quarterback position against a Brian Flores defense. But why on earth would you rush a quarterback, your starting quarterback that you just paid this offseason? Why would you rush him out there a week or two too early? Yes, he has practiced this week. Yes, it's an MCL sprain. I think you try to ride Malik Willis for as long as you can before getting Jordan Love back in there.
Excellent job, Courtney. You can catch Courtney Sunday mornings. Best week ever with Peter Burns, ESPN Radio. When are we going to see you again around the horn on television? When do we see you?
Next week, we'll be breaking it all down from week 4. We'll see if any of my predictions that I make this week will be right, and then I'll come and do a victory lap if they are. And if they're not, then I will just be quiet.
Excellent job, Courtney. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.